So this is my first video in... wait, how long?
What? It's just an ordinary crabby... Oh my goodness!
It's been almost a year since my last video, so what better way to come back than by addressing legacy? Not that I have one, but you know. I think the stories and characters that we grow up with are very important to us because they can shape the way we see the world. They can guide the kind of people we want to be. But something we all have to come to terms with is that those characters are probably going to outlive the people who pioneered them, and they'll probably outlive us too. I think the pop culture world felt this a few years ago when Stan Lee passed, a man who was so synonymous with the characters he created that it was hard to imagine how those stories would carry on without him. Or another Marvel example, when Chadwick Boseman passed and his role as T'Challa was seen as so irreplaceable that they didn't even consider recasting him, and worked his character's death into the plot of the movie. But herein lies an issue I need to address, and for anyone who might not get it, I will clarify. I'm not saying that I think they should have recast T'Challa, I'm just saying it's kinda inevitable. Somewhere down the line there will be another Black Panther story that someone wants to tell on screen, and that story will require the character T'Challa. Now, knowing the direction the industry is going in, it's entirely possible that they could pull some AI or use some other awful technology to resurrect the guy on some Flash shit, but that's a discussion for another video coming soon to a computer near you. For now, let's just operate on the assumption that somewhere down the line, T'Challa is likely to reappear on screen at some point. The character is too important, but a little more cynically, too profitable for Marvel to just throw him away because they're worried about dishonoring Boseman's legacy. Now, I know that was a pretty death-heavy opening for a video with Mario in the thumbnail, so I promise I'll give you what you came for, but everything I've said so far is necessary to the framing of this video. I know I've used a lot of superhero examples in the first 2 minutes of this video, but that's deliberate because, you know, superheroes get recast all the time. Even when it was revealed that Henry Cavill wasn't going to be playing Superman anymore, sure, people were mad for a few minutes, but they were generally receptive to the idea of a new actor taking on the role because they wanted to see a new interpretation. Characters like Clark Kent have had dozens of actors play them. Characters like Peter Parker have had dozens of actors play them. But when you take a character like Mario, who's truly been synonymous with one actor for over 2 decades, well, that's a little different. Now, my opinion on Chris Pratt's Mario has softened a lot in the months since his movie came out, especially because longtime voice actor Charles Martinet isn't playing the character at all anymore. His cameo appearances in this movie are seemingly his send-off to the character, especially his very fitting role as Mario's father. So all of that's very nice, but the thing that really sets the Mario movie apart from everything else I'm going to talk about in this video is that Chris Pratt isn't a voice actor first. He's a screen actor first. And I don't say this to discredit his abilities as a voice actor. In fact, I think he's pretty good as Emmett in the Lego movie. But the whole draw of that character is that he's this super basic, normal, boring guy. And that's not what I think of when I think of Mario. What I'm really saying is that if Chris Pratt is cast in a VA role, it's probably not because he's exceptional, it's because he's a big name. And so even if Chris Pratt's acting as Mario isn't awful, you can't convince me that the role wouldn't be better suited for a capable voice actor who probably needs the work more than him. And that sounds kinda speculative in a vacuum, right? But when you look at the entire English voice cast, it becomes pretty clear that they were trying to get as much star power as possible. Almost every major character is voiced by a big name celebrity, and most of them aren't incredible voice actors. Like, don't get me wrong, someone like Anya Taylor-Joy is an amazing actress, but based off this movie, I don't feel like she's an amazing voice actress. Like, one of my favorite movies of the last year was The Menu, and that's largely due to her very understated approach to her character. She emotes a lot through her face, but the actual lines are very low-key in comparison. But it's notable that one of the words I do not think of when I think of Princess Peach is understated or low-key. VA work and screen actor work require a different set of skills. Voice actors know they can't rely on any physical aspects when they're in a recording booth, so that's why they oversell a lot of their line deliveries. When we're talking about these legacy characters like Mario, it's notable that they've remained so iconic without having very many complex portrayals. It's because, in the games, Mario is very animated, very excited. Martinet never had to say a lot, but between all the woohoos and the let's go's, he was always able to communicate so much of what made Mario Mario. And this philosophy lives on in the recently released Mario Wonder, what feels like the first game ever to not feature Martinet in the titular role. He's voiced instead by the fantastic Kevin Afghani, who up until this point had been a relatively unknown voice actor, and these are the kinds of opportunities that would have made me like the movie a whole lot more. In my opinion, Charlie Day and Jack Black are the only members of the main cast who really understood how to oversell, and one of them's barely in the movie. Everyone else is fine, but like, Mario just sounds like a guy. DK just sounds like Seth Rogen, and Peach just sounds like a girl, and that's frustrating because we know there's a million voice actors out there who could do better and would in no way have hurt the sales of this movie. But at the end of the day, I could honestly care less if a movie I wasn't a big fan of to begin with doesn't have the best performances in the world. But there's tons of talented voice actors who are qualified and might have even deserved to have a shot with this movie. But what happens when an actor is cheated out of a role they probably deserve? Ask the anime community.
Hell yeah, dude, I'm crushing it with these segues.
So a few years ago, I made this really bad video where I talked about Inaris Quinones, the voice of Mirko in My Hero Academia, but more importantly, Kimberly, my main in SF6, among other characters, and I wish it was under better circumstances, but I have to talk about her again. Before I even get into this, I have to give her a big shout out because the amount of harassment she has to deal with every time she accepts a job is just pure insanity. We should all know by now that it's hard for black women to even get away with existing in this world, and she's a very public example of this. I obviously don't know her, but she seems lovely, and it goes without saying that I love her work. So in this case, she received backlash for taking the role of Yoruichi in Bleach, and look, I get it. I know it always causes drama when a legacy character is recast. We just addressed this. But when you inject racism into the equation, Quinones was seemingly happy to announce that she would be taking over for Wendy Lee as the character in the new Bleach 1000 Year Blood War anime. And that's about all it took for people to start getting really racist. Like, I wouldn't recommend doing it, but you can really just scroll through the quote tweets and it's crazy. Shit looks like a Klan rally.
Hold on, I got a Ku Klux Klan member on my page. Let me block this Ku Klux Klan member.
This fucking sucks. Stop changing our characters' perfect voices just because you found some colored voice actor to voice your black character. We had a great voice for the character already, and she wanted to voice the character again.
Do you know how racist you have to be to say colored in 2023?
Great. Another diversity hire. This is why I no longer blame people for pirating anime, SMH.
This is why you don't blame people for pirating anime? Studios like MAPPA are abusing their employees to the point where they can't go home and see their families. And you draw the line at a black woman getting hired to voice a black woman? Wendy is on record about how much she wanted to return to this role. There's no way she voluntarily stepped down. This was a casting director forcing an agenda. I hate this industry. We've killed one of the things that made voice work unique. Skin color shouldn't matter. And hey, while I don't agree with this person, this is probably a better place to start the kind of conversation I want to have. As I've said in the past, voice acting is great because it does allow people to feasibly take on roles without being limited by the confines of their bodies. So people are able to voice characters with different body types than them, different genders than them, different races than them, and obviously Yoruichi's race isn't a one-to-one to any real-world races we have, but like, come on, she obviously isn't a white woman. Because people of color and queer people have been thrown to the wayside since this industry's inception, studios do have an obligation to make sure they are casting diverse people in applicable diverse roles wherever possible. People who fall into these groups have been counted out of so many roles for so long, and I feel that they deserve the opportunity to tell their own stories authentically. And then people bring up the concept of a diversity hire, someone who isn't necessarily qualified for the role, but they were cast because they fit the necessary demographic. But if you know anything of Quinones' work, you know that she's anything but that. She's an amazing voice actor who's more than qualified for a character like Yoruichi, and I'm sure she would have been great in the role. I'd just say would've because we'll never know for sure. It's unclear exactly why she lost the role, but from the outside it really looks like it was a response to the backlash. And naturally, when this announcement was made, a bunch of other voice actors came into her comments and flooded it with solidarity and well wishes because, you know, it sucks to lose a role that you had out of nowhere. This wasn't a surprise to me. I follow a lot of voice actors and I'm used to seeing them stick together, especially in light of all the recent job insecurity brought on by AI. But like I said earlier, that's a discussion for another video coming soon to a computer near you. What did surprise me, however, was Wendy Lee systematically going through these comments to reply to almost every voice actor who showed solidarity, and she, to say the least, wasn't happy. Now, if you don't know who Wendy Lee is, I really recommend you look her up on IMDb, where she has over 600 credits. She's probably been in something that you know. She's been in this industry for decades. She's had an illustrious career. She's voiced iconic characters. She's 63 years old. Why is she beefing with actors half her age on Twitter? A lot of the tweets from this situation have since been deleted, so the best I can do is use screenshots that exist within this article from The Verge, which you should definitely go read. But I think it goes without saying that a lot of deleted tweets is usually not a good sign. This woman was definitely in the wrong. That's wild. You sounded fantastic as her, and I'm sorry you're going through this. Just maintaining the iconic character, Kaylee. This is not a slight at you, just the choice to recast and then renege after the fact. Regardless of the reason, it was a really uncool thing to do to an heiress. No? And what position does that put me in? This is the biz. We all get recast at some point. In this case, it was mistakenly done by the person scheduling. I'm truly, honestly, just trying to show support for someone who was hurt, but I'll try to be more quiet in the future. I'm sorry if what I said came as an attack. You're both very talented actors who didn't deserve public discourse. Hurt? By a scheduling error? It's the biz. Mistakes happen. Thought after all these years, I might have your support too. And I don't read all these tweets just to show you how much of an asshole I think Wendy Lee is, and I do think she is one. I read you these tweets to sort of outline a fundamental disconnect between the way some people view voice acting. When Wendy Lee says hurt by a scheduling error, it's almost funny to me because it's like, no, of course she's not hurt by a scheduling error. She's hurt because she lost her job. She's hurt because she lost a role that she already successfully landed and recorded an episode for what could have been the role of a lifetime. Yoruichi's a famous character. Like, there's so many reasons beyond a scheduling error. Why would you distill it down to that? That's kind of disingenuous to me. Voice acting is a job at the end of the day, and voice actors are notoriously underpaid, so unless the role is like morally reprehensible in some way, I can't really fault most voice actors for taking a voice role. And that kind of ties us into our last story.
We're breaking the law, breaking the world together. Tenderness.
So I don't think this is super good, but I also think that's okay, actually. I think that's okay. Back in June, Young Ya announced that he was going to be taking on the role of Kazama Kiryu in the Yakuza series going forward. By the way, I know we call it like a dragon in the West now. I'm sorry. It'll be easier for me if I just call it Yakuza. Now, we've been over this. People were apprehensive because the character who's long been voiced by the same guy was being replaced, but it is unique in this case because Young Ya is a YouTuber and there's a stigma around that. Now, to give him some credit and benefit of the doubt, Young has said many times that he's an actor first. He's been trying to be an actor forever, and he's had some notable voice acting roles. He played Poochie in the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure dub, and he's part of the reason why Poochie is one of my favorite villains in the series. But just because he's a good actor, that doesn't mean he's above being miscast. I don't think that what we've seen of Young's Kiryu so far is bad at all. I just think it is a little bit off, and it's hard for me to put my finger on it. It's like his voice isn't deep enough. Things like that, though. Things that can get ironed out. The acting itself is good, and I stand by that. But the worst part is a lot of those fans who usually cry about diversity hires actually have a leg to stand on. Obviously, Daryl Curlio, the previous actor for Kiryu, was a white man, and Yong Ya is a visibly East Asian man. But here's the kicker. He's the wrong kinda East Asian. It should go without saying that the main character of a series called Yakuza is Japanese, but Yong Ya is a Korean voice actor. And this isn't something I have a problem with, but I do think it's important to keep in mind the concept of cultural specificity when you're casting for diverse roles. For example, Hollywood has a habit of casting Colombian actors for Mexican roles, or Mexican actors for Venezuelan roles, and whatnot, so on and so forth. In this case, it is kinda important that they get it right because it looks like they went out of their way to get it right. So it would be really funny if they recast Yong Ya later on and, had a Japanese man take his place. In any case, a lot of fans aren't coming at it from the perspective of cultural specificity, and they're just taking the opportunity to hate on Yong's performance without any thought about the kind of performance he's giving. They're just labeling him as a bad actor. And so that led to him blocking a lot of people on Twitter, and then people started to call him out for it, but it's like, can you imagine being the target of the vitriol of thousands of people? Because I can't. It's probably horrifying. So I don't take him blocking people as him deflecting criticism. I take it as him probably protecting his mental health, because seeing that many people coming at you every day probably isn't good for it. I see a lot of people saying things like, he shouldn't have taken the role if he knew he wasn't good for it, but there is where we go back to voice acting as a job. If you're offered the role of Kazama Kiryu, I don't care who you are, you're probably taking it, especially if you're a voice actor, especially if you claim to love the series like Yong does. If you look up Yong Ya Kiryu voice acting on YouTube, you'll see videos talking about how he ruined the series, how he's pathetic, how he's a total fraud, and it is what it is. I just don't feel that strongly about it. I'm willing to let him cook, but people have, their convictions, and I just hope that they're founded in goodness on some level, because they seem really vitriolic and mean to me. So I know this video has been really all over the place, and I hope you don't hold it against me because this has been my first time trying this in about a year, but I just wanted to get some of my thoughts out there and address the concept of legacy through voice acting. Parts of this video are underdeveloped, others are overdeveloped, and the whole project is pretty self-indulgent for me, but if I've succeeded at starting a single conversation, then I've done all I really want to, and, that's enough for me. Peace.